So I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I can only imagine how busy you must be because your field is one that is definitely necessary for not only the autism community, but so many different human beings, basically, because who doesn't have an allergy or some type of special need to where they could benefit from using medical ID bracelets? So why don't we just sort of talk about a little bit about yourself. So tell us
Sure,
about who you are and why you got into this. What was the draw for you?
sure. Well, first, thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you just for having us. Uh, Here at Lawrence Hope, our customers are so dear to us. We're very emotionally attached to our customers because what we do is such a personal thing. Medical ID jewelry is personal. And so people call and they ask for help. What do I engrave? Which medical ID is right for me? And we have these very, very intimate personal conversations with our customers. And it is such a gift to us to get to serve all of these communities that we serve, because people will tell us, I feel safer going out on my own. I feel safer when I'm wearing it. I feel safer sending my child out into the world because they're wearing it. And I know that my number is on them, right? Because what we provide is not really jewelry. What we really provide is the means to peace of mind. And that that is not an autism thing. That's just a human thing, right? And so to me, like it's such a gift. It's a gift to be able to do what we do, and it's a gift to be able to come and share it. So thank you for having us. As for me, my path to Lawrence Hope was kind of a very weird combination of things. I When my children were little, I was an at-home parent and I was doing some marketing work just on the side, right? Just some other things to do from home to keep my skill set up while I was primarily being an at-home mom. And while I was expecting my second child, my son Will was diagnosed with autism at 22 months, which in 2005 was almost unheard of. It was it's so early, right? And I had to fight for that diagnosis. And as parents listening, I would assume many can relate that that diagnosis is a hard one to get, especially back then, and especially that young, because it was are you you know you maybe you're being kind of a nervous first time mom, welcome to the terrible twos, like sometimes they start a little early. But I was so fortunate to have a very dear friend who had a son about a year older than mine who had just been diagnosed, and another dear friend of mine, and we were all kind of in the same mom group, was a pediatric speech language pathologist. And so between these two ladies, I sat at a spa night with them, and the one who had a child with autism came by and started just, she was venting. She needed support. But some of what she said really sounded like my son. And it really kind of made me think because I had been a little concerned with his language progression because he had about 10 words, and then slowly I wasn't hearing him gain any new words, and then some of his words seemed to drop off. So I consulted with my friend who was a speech language pathologist, and she said, yeah, you need to go have some conversations about that. I mean, she would never have gone so far as to diagnose him herself. She's not a diagnostician, but she sent me in the right direction. And we started all of those consultations. And as I met with our pediatrician, he was an excellent pediatrician for neurotypical children. One of the hardest practices to get into. We were living in Florida at the time, and he was just a remarkable, wonderful physician. Autism was not as prevalent as it is now, and he was probably 30 years into his practice, and it was not a space that he had a ton of experience with. And so I completely recognize why he would have said to me, you know, kids have tantrums, that type of thing. But I just knew that wasn't it. And so in if you knew me, this is very, very much how I operate. I printed out all of the criteria for the at that time current DSM for all five autism spectrum disorders, because that's what it was at the time, and then color code highlighted my research, and then just like walked into his office with this like stack and went, here, look at this. And And he went, "Oh, okay, yeah, so maybe we have something to look at here." Um, and it really did help to be able to show him in a more clinical way. And so that sent us down a path. And we very quickly, I was also fortunate because that girlfriend of mine who had a child with autism was so kind to share a lot of her research that she had already done, because there just wasn't enough available online to start all on your own and do all of this all over again. And I was so fortunate that she had done a lot of research into a gluten-free diet. She had done a lot of research into what was being called the DAN protocol at the time. And that was what was the current thinking. And some of that has since been kind of gone by the wayside, and some of it is not. My son is still gluten free to this day, and it makes a huge difference. And was even so far as diagnosed with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, because it really is a thing. But at the time, even my pediatrician was like, "How dare you not give your kid whole grains?" And like he was scandalized, right, that I was like neglecting this whole part of my child's diet. And I understood where he was coming from, but we moved to a different pediatrician who specialized in children with autism and their siblings. And that was a much better fit for us. But months and months later, maybe even a year later, he called me and asked me who I went to for all of the gluten free stuff, for all of the dietary stuff, because he was seeing more autism in his practice and he wanted to integrate all of this new thinking, which I really appreciate. So anyway, very, very long origin story short. Will was 2 when all of that was starting, but by the time he's 3, you age out of early intervention, at least in Florida at the time. That's when you age out and you transition into the schools. So you have to send a nonverbal 3-year-old to an elementary school with like 10-year-olds. And I was terrified, right? Because he had been home with me, right? If he was always like with me or with his dad. And the idea that we were going to hand him over to people who were lovely, but they were strangers to us and our son, I it was paralyzing to me as a mother to have to know he needed this help and know he needed this intensive language support and behavioral support at school and all the therapy he was going to get, but to just send him off. Like I thought, what if he wanders? What if anything? Like he didn't answer to his name. He still doesn't always answers to his name. So I was very, very nervous. And so I went out on the internet and I bought all the like custom printed labels, right? Everything my kid has had a vinyl label all over it, right? This poor child was just like plastered in stickers. And I had stickers inside his shoes. I don't know why. Who's going to look there? I I could not label enough of his stuff. But he also had a real tendency to strip off his clothes sometimes because he was toddler, um, and he didn't always have his shoes on. I just thought I need something that is on his person, not just on his stuff. So I ordered a medical ID, which I had always kind of associated with people who have diabetes, older people, and and a medical illness, right? And I didn't think of autism that way. And it wasn't an illness to me. And so it just never occurred to me earlier to do that. And when I thought of it, I went online. I looked up, who sells medical. I don't know, where do you buy these things, right? And found some medical IDs, and I bought him a medical ID. I put it on him, and he broke it within like a week. I mean, he was so hard on it, and they weren't well made. And so I would call these companies and I would say, can you help me? Like, how do I like? Is there a warranty? Like, do I have to replace this? Like, what happens, right? And I just got no help. And in the cases where I thought it was like he broke this, obviously I don't expect somebody to cover that for me. We know that some with a child who's severely impacted and is profound. Their diagnosis is profound. My son is level 3 autism. He's not aware of the cost of a piece of jewelry. He's not aware of trying not to damage a thing, right? So, this was a kid who at the time would take his iPods, which helped him function outside the house, but he'd take them and slam them on a concrete ground. And so that bracelet to him was nothing. And so I bought him these bracelets. They broke. I got no service from these companies. And it was very frustrating because I wanted something on him all the time. So I eventually, one more round of research, I ran across Lawrence Hope, never heard of it. Um, but they had kids' medical IDs, and I thought, all right, cool. I bought Will this little beaded bracelet. It was like this cute little beaded bracelet with these black wooden beads with three little silver balls. And I just thought it was really cute and very lightweight. It looked like it would be lightweight, and it seemed like he would probably like it and he'd be okay with it. Bought this bracelet, put it on him, and he loved it. And I always say he loved it like a little too much because he chewed those little silver balls into little bead pancakes. And, you know, silver balls on a bracelet are meant to be hollow, so they're light, right? And it keeps the expense down too. But that made them kind of jagged, so I had to take it off him. And I called Lauren Soap, and I was just in such a stressed place in my life. So let me grab a bracelet, kind of show you what I'm talking about. But this one's beaded. It's obviously not a child's bracelet, but the most of our bracelets, our signature line, have a lobster clasp at either end, and then they have a medical ID tag, right? So you can take the tag off and you can move it to a different bracelet, which is really fun for adults, and typically for women, right? You want to kind of not wear the same thing every day. But for a child, you want something super sturdy and durable, right? So, a chain or something like that. But for some reason, I just chose a beaded thing for him. I didn't even think of a chain at the time because I didn't know. But then you have them engraved. You can see this one. I think I can try and get you a good angle. That one is engraved with a sample engraving. This is not anybody's personal engraving. And I didn't understand. Do I have to buy a new tag and the new bracelet? Can I just buy a new bracelet? And if I do, then what size do I tell you? I was just like, can someone just help me? I just got on the phone. Like, can I just talk to a person? Can someone help me? Oh, Lawrence Hope. And a human being answered the phone, which right away I was like, what? Who are these people? And I got the loveliest lady on the phone. She was so nice. And I explained the situation to her. And I said, how does this work? Do I need to buy this? Do I need to buy that? She said, you don't need to buy anything. And I said, I'm sorry, like, what do you mean? She goes, no, it's under warranty, which it really wasn't. But she was being very kind. She said, we have a 6-month unconditional warranty. I'm like, okay, no, no. Like my kid ate the bracelet. Like this is on me, right? This is not a warranty thing. But she said, if you don't mind telling me a little bit about your son, I would really like to help you. And I could tell she was going outside of what is, normal. But she was a mom, and I think she just her mom heart really went out to me, and it meant so much to me because as parents of children with autism, particularly when you have a child who's so profoundly impacted and they are loud and they vocalize and they do all of these things that when you're not used to it can make people very uncomfortable. And it had been my experience so far because he was so disruptive in so many places that people kind of shied away from us and were uncomfortable with us. And I understood that. I didn't like it, but autism was not as common at the time as it is now. And it was not talked about as much. And so to have someone be so embracing and helpful was such a big deal to me as a parent. And for it to be a business just really astounded me. So she said, if you don't mind telling me a little bit about your son, we make our jewelry here in this building and we can make him anything he needs. And so I told her how hard he is on things and how active he was and how he loved to climb and all the things about him. She said, you're going to send me that bracelet. We're going to take the silver balls off. We're going to fill in the rest of the space with those black beads because they're solid and there's no way he can chew through them. I'm going to have because they're large bore beads, which she knew because we manufacture it here in the building. She said, we're going to double strand this on watch wire. So it'll be extra durable. And I'm going to send it right back to you. No charge. I had that bracelet back within a week. She had said to me, do me a favor. Let me know how it goes. If it works, great. If it doesn't, just let us know. We really want to help you and make sure your son has what he needs. And I just couldn't get over that. I was so floored by that. That compassion and grace was really so beautiful to me. And so I called and I asked for the marketing director because there were no reviews on the website. I mean, that was just becoming a thing on the internet at the time. And I called and I asked for the marketing director and I said, can I just tell you, your customer service is just remarkable. I have to give this lady a shout out. You don't have reviews on your site. Can I give you a testimonial? Like, I will be a customer for life, but I really want to make sure that I am telling someone to whom your customer care probably reports, right? I just want you to know this thing and what they did for me and for my family. And it was March, and she said to me, I was speaking with this lady, Jenna White, who's now our director of e-commerce. She's still with the business, and she said, "Well, next month is Autism Awareness Month. Do you want to write a blog article together? Can I interview you for our blog?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds like a great idea, right?" I sent her some pictures of Will. She interviewed me. We did some fun stuff together. And over the course of the next year, I needed to order an extra bracelet for Will. He broke one. And anytime I needed to do something, it was a custom order because the bracelet was custom. And of course, if you have a kid like this, you know, it has to be the exact same bracelet, right? You can't go changing it. That was not, we went through like 4 years where I had to find uh, out of production shoes because they had to be the same shoes. You know, we've been there. So I would call and they would do this for me, and we built this relationship. And eventually, they had asked me. They knew that I did some marketing on the side, and they said, "Hey, would you like to do some freelance work for us?" And I said, "I tell people about you guys for free on a regular basis. Are you kidding? Heck yeah! You want to pay me for this? That's great." So I started freelancing for the business, and the first year I did that, I wrote the autism month article that year as a freelancer. And the next year, I wrote that article in my office at Lawrence Hope. I moved across the country to the Midwest to work for this wonderful, amazing company because it had so deeply impacted my life, and I knew what that was for a parent of a child with any kind of special needs, just how substantial and significant that was. And I believed so strongly in the product and in the company itself and the mission. And as a marketer, to get to market something that you actually really truly use in real life, that you really believe in, and not just that you got on board with because you got hired by a company, was a real gift.
When it comes to the community as a whole and the people that you serve, are there any, I guess, really stories that you might be able to share, sort of like your
Sure.
own,
Mhm.
that kind of rise to the top as to where you thought, wow, okay, so this was a really good interactions that we had. This was a parent that was really in need, or an individual,
Yes.
maybe a self advocate that was in need
Mhm.
of of what we have to offer.
Yeah. There's one that really stands out. Our Where we are located, we're in Kansas City, Missouri. In this area, it's kind of a mix of commercial and industrial. Right next to us is an auto parts place where they do a lot of like custom upholstery and all of these kind of. If you have a really cool old car, that's where you go. And so I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's relevant. We had this lady call in. She was so lovely, and her child had special needs. And as I recall, her child was severely impacted by his autism. And he loved dinosaurs. That was one of his special interests. And dinosaurs were his jam. We have this little dinosaur that one of our graphic designers actually created. It's a dog tag for kids and it has a little T Rex on it. We call him Safe T Rex because that's adorable. And you can put all the information on the back and it has medical symbol in front. It's very cute. And kids like it. But her concern was, I can't put a necklace on my kid. He doesn't have the danger awareness of something around his neck, and it would be very easy for him to take off. And she didn't think that he was going to be compliant in wearing that. And he was also very metal sensitive, and she didn't want to put a necklace around his neck for that reason as well. She said, "Is there any way you can turn that dog tag into a bracelet?" Well, a dog tag has a hole at one end. I mean, and you don't want a charm that big, hanging down your kid's hand. That's not going to work either. So our customer care said, ask the team, who's got an idea here? How can we do this? And Leanne, our CEO, went, give me that tag. And she just walked next door to the car guys, who we barely even know, and walked over there and said, can you bore a hole in metal? And just took this tag over there, and they were so kind. And she explained the situation, and they were so kind. So they made a matching hole at the other end. And then one of our team members got out some paracord and hand braided some paracord. And then we affixed that tag. We had engraved the tag for him and then affixed the tag to the paracord so it could be flipped over in an emergency, but so that that was serving as an ID. And I just can't think of a business that I've ever heard of where the CEO would do that. Here's this incredibly busy lady running this business, and she just stopped everything she was doing to go over and ask the car parts guys if they could make a hole in this. And I think most companies would have said, like, it's a dog tag, like there's nothing we can do to make your dog tag not be a dog tag. And but she did, and it really meant a lot to me. It wasn't my kid, but what she did that day reinforced for me that the kindness and the grace that was extended to me when I was a customer was not a one-off thing.
Sort of, I guess, along those lines,
Mhm.
and and branching off from that a little bit. Some people with autism, they can't tolerate something
Yep,
going on them. I know a lot of
that's true.
families look into like the tracking devices, but
Mhm.
I sadly have known children and adults actually that will hurt themselves to get that thing off.
Yes,
So have you had that experience? Do you have any
yes,
tips like for a parent who may think, "Oh, yeah, I would love
yes,
to do this, but I don't think so." What would you
yes,
say to that person?
yes. I can help you with that. That is a very common question. First of all, I'm going to break that into a few parts. There is nothing wrong with tracking devices. I have no beef with that. We don't sell them because that's just not our core competency. We are not tech people. 100%, if that's the thing you think your kid needs, I think we should all do whatever we need to do to protect our children, whether they are children or adults. And there are some wonderful, wonderful tools on the market for that. A tracking device, however, is not a medical ID. It is a separate need, just like when you see people who wear fall alert systems, right? So my grandmother has the little push button thing, right? Um, and she can even go out and about, and it works anywhere now. It's not just like you have to be in the house or something. They make them, and they work on cell signals now. It's pretty cool. But a bystander isn't necessarily going to know what that is. It doesn't say what to do, and it doesn't have your information on it. You could push that button and then someone's going to talk to you and you're going to have this whole conversation, right? But it's not a medical ID. It's a way to call for help, and that's different. A medical ID is designed to speak for the wearer in the event that they need assistance and are not able to advocate for themselves. So this can be a person for whom communication is a challenge. This could be a person who's unconscious, right? This is I wear my medical ID because I have a bunch of allergies and because I am a caregiver. And I'll explain that in a minute. But everyone has their own reason for wearing their medical ID, but the core function is to speak for you when you cannot advocate for yourself. So trackers serve a totally different purpose that is also super duper important. I have air tags now on a bunch of my son's stuff because he uses an AAC device for communication. And those things, we were so fortunate we were granted one by this lovely organization here in Missouri, but they're like $10,000. And my son, who doesn't have the awareness that a bracelet is expensive, is the one who carries that around. So I have an air tag on that in case he leaves it somewhere. And so and also he usually has it with him, and so that's nice because I can see where he is. But that is a very separate thing. Um, a lot of those are locking devices, or they, were last time I looked at some of them. And as you were saying, people have injured themselves trying to get them off. Those devices, there are also companies that make medical IDs that have maybe not a lock, but a clasp that requires two hands to remove, and it's intentional so that the wearer can never take it off themselves. We do not sell these. They are not safe in uh, our estimation because there comes a point in an emergency when you want your medical ID to break. If you're in a trauma and your bracelet gets stuck on something and you're trying to get out of that situation, there needs to be a point at which enough force will let you break that. And anything that isn't going to break away for you in a real emergency could be dangerous to you. If you can't at least just open the clasp and get it off yourself, right? Even if it won't break, but you got to be able to take it off. Um, and that's a real challenge that we hear about for from caregivers who have anyone with any sort of cognitive impairment, right? Or who isn't super compliant about their IDs. We see that with the Alzheimer's community and other forms of dementia and aging. We see that with kids with all sorts of conditions who just don't want to wear their medical IDs, right? It's just why we make them really fun and bright and colorful because it helps get kids on board. Um, so we don't do that. And what we do instead is we make really sturdy IDs. And I recommend that particularly for a first round, when you as a parent are ordering a medical ID, I highly recommend choosing one of our interchangeables, and I highly recommend a chain. They're not the super pretty and all the things like that's everybody is kind of like, oh, but I really want this like super sparkly, rose gold two-stranded bracelet. Sure. But as we get started, for someone who may not be thrilled about wearing an ID or who may not really understand the importance of it, to get used to wearing it, I highly recommend choosing a chain. Our chains are stainless steel, they are nickel free. I am an incredibly metal sensitive person. So I can tell you, I wear all our jewelry. I have never, ever had a reaction to it. That doesn't mean that no one ever does. I mean, it can happen. People can be incredibly sensitive to all sorts of things. But people who have trouble with costume jewelry, things like that, don't tend to have a problem with our jewelry because it is nickel free. As stainless, what's nice about the silver tone stainless is this is the most waterproof thing we can sell you. What I love about that as a parent is that you put this bracelet on your kid and then you don't touch it. There is no taking it off at night and putting it back on and in the morning. We don't have that conversation every day. It's not time to put your bracelet on. It just is on. I recommend putting it on your child's non-dominant hand because it's less obtrusive, right? My kid's at school doing hand over hand work with his para. I don't want his bracelet in the way of that. I don't want it annoying him. He's already annoyed that they're making him do hand over hand work, right? I'm not trying to make the para's job harder. So we put this on the non-dominant hand. There is a conception out there that medical IDs always go on your left wrist, and that's not true. EMTs are trained to check both wrists and the neck for the medical symbol. And so just in this little collection I have in my office today, you can see we do them in different metal tones. They have cute little, like, I like this one because it kind of has this Minecrafty thing going on in the back. Kids like it. But we also have just plain, full red, right? As a parent, I wanted my young children's medical IDs to be as obtrusive as possible. So I chose silver with a bright red symbol. Now, my daughter is a teenager. Her autism is level 1. She's highly verbal and, she's an AP student. She's very communicative. Her ability to communicate is not impaired. And so I'll let her pick any tag she wants because it doesn't have to be as obtrusive for her. And she's more comfortable wearing an ID that is a little more subtle. That is part of what we do because ultimately an EMT is going to turn your arm over to take your blood pressure, right? So it's one of the first things they do and take your pulse rate and your blood pressure. So they see your ID and they're trained to look for that symbol.
Anybody watching, I'm going to include below here or beside, depending upon where you're watching. I'll include the link so that you guys will be able to see all the gorgeous jewelry that's on there. But it's funny because when we were, my son was going to pick one out, we went through all these really gorgeous pieces, and he decided on that one, that exact one that you just showed.
Really?
The
That's so
very
funny.
simple,
Yep.
heavyweight bracelet
Mhm.
part, and yes, what type of information do you think is like the biggest, most? Because there's only a limit, it got this much space, right? It's not a whole
Mhm.
lot of space. So, what would you suggest is like these are the things that really need to go on
My son developed epilepsy at 18, and we were very, very fortunate that he didn't develop it earlier because there's a 30% comorbidity between autism and epilepsy. And the we're so fortunate here in Kansas City, there is one of the only about a dozen pediatric neurology subspecialty epilepsy clinics is here at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. And when we went there, they told us there's 30% comorbidity, and also the more severely impacted by autism a person is, the more likely they are to have epilepsy. I was not aware of this because that was one part of autism that I had never even. I just knew he didn't have seizures, and I was super grateful about it, because I was very grateful. Um, and I have watched him have tonic-clonic seizures, which we used to call grand mal seizures, but current terminology is tonic-clonic. And if you've ever seen a seizure on TV, it's very much that. And I've watched my son and held him through that, because he was not in a safe place. And that as a mom, when you've seen that, and then that's happening and you're not there, um, to know that at least you were able to be called immediately. You weren't called after he was taken to a hospital with bright lights and the situation was just made so much worse, right? You were called and you could tell them how to help him. I think when you are a special needs parent, we often get used to having to really over articulate, and really be very, very specific because our kids need it, right? And so your tendency is to want to put as much as you can on the ID. But the thing to remember is that your medical ID is not your medical history. It is not the complete picture of everything that one might need to know about this person. It is, you need to know these things before you touch me. You need to know these things to help me immediately. And here's who you call to get more information. So when we think about it in those terms, it's name. I like date of birth when you can fit it. And the reason in particular is because you may not be in your home area, right? So a lot of people have the same name, right? Especially if you have a common kind of name, your name on there is important to identify you, but it's not going to help them locate your medical records, right? Because if they're not entirely sure of who you are. So sometimes people put in their birth date for that reason. We never engrave social security numbers. People do put them on there once in a while, and we call them, and we don't do it, because if you lose your bracelet, you just lost your name, your emergency contact, and your social security number. I'm like, that's a terrible idea. So we recommend your name, your primary medical condition, any allergies, drug, food, anything. Um, if you're allergic to pollen, we're not putting that on there, right? But if you're allergic to bee stings, we are. Things that can cause immediate and sudden kinds of reactions. And then at least one emergency contact. So my son's IDs usually look like Will Cohen with his date of birth, autism level 3, nonverbal, no gluten, and sorry, above the no gluten, I'll put in epilepsy. And I've found some nice ways to be able to engrave, like, so we'll say, so here's this one that I have pre-engraved, says Bradley Asher, autism 3, nonverbal, intellectual disability, epilepsy, on meds, 911 if alone, and then an ICE number. Always precede that number with the letters ICE. It stands for in case of emergency. EMTs know this. A lot of people waste a line going, call mom, and then mom's name, and then the phone number. And that's a waste of a whole line because they know what ICE is. And if they call you and they say, hey, we have this person in front of us wearing this medical ID and your number is on there, you know who they're talking about and you can have that conversation, right? They don't need to call you and address you by name. That's just about being polite, right? So you can save a line that way. There are also a lot of really common abbreviations. So you can fit so much in those 6 lines. We also have dog tags that take up to 8 lines which I really like for adults who understand the importance of their ID and are compliant about wearing it. You can do something like this. It gives you more engraving space. If you don't know how to abbreviate it, you can't fit everything, or you're just not sure which things to put on, just call us. I am sitting here in North Kansas City, and I can tell you that across this building, about 30 feet away, it's a whole room of people who make these bracelets by hand. And right next to them is a room where we engrave our products here in the building. And next to them is our customer service department. When you call us, you do not get a person who is in a different country. You do not get a person who doesn't really work for us, but just kind of answers the phone on off hours. If we're closed, you get voicemail because it takes at least 6 months for someone in our customer service team to learn enough to really serve our customers well. And we don't expect Zendesk or some other thing to be able to help you that way. So we tell you, we'll call you when we're here because we're the ones who want to help you. And we're a family-owned business, or we're a woman-owned business, and we don't we don't farm that out. So if you call us, you're going to get someone who works here who knows what they're talking about, and they're going to walk you through it. They'll walk you through how to measure properly. They'll walk you through what might be good options for you or your family, and they'll help you with your engraving. And that personal care is so important, and especially when you're in a stress space, right? I mean, sometimes you're just reordering a new ID, but usually something happened that made you go look for this, right? It's, y- your son gets a new diagnosis, right? Or a big thing happens and they didn't have a medical ID on and they really should have, and now you're really adamant that it's always going to be on them from now on, right? We hear this a lot. That's why we have people on the phone, because we know you're stressed out and you're dealing with a lot. When you have health conditions or you have a child who does, you're so used to having to fight with everybody, right? To fight with insurance, you got to fight to advocate for your kid with schools, with doctors, what have you. You feel like you have to be that fierce advocate so often. And you don't have to do that with us because this is what we do and we're happy to help and we'll walk you through it. So the short answer is put your name, put your chief medical conditions, your allergies, and put an emergency contact.
Talk about a parent or a caregiver. What would be the benefit of them wearing a piece of
Yeah.
your jewelry?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a wonderful question. So I am a parent caregiver. My ex-husband is a parent caregiver. He has his own medical conditions, and so do I. We both, on our own, should be wearing medical IDs, and we do. But we also put on our medical IDs caregiver, nonverbal child with autism, see wallet card, and phone. I use up 2 lines of engraving for this because I have a bunch of allergies. I have a lymphedema risk because I have had a mastectomy. We all have our stuff, right? I wear my medical ID to protect myself, but I am fully aware that in an emergency, my son will be non-compliant. He may appear to have had a trauma, right? If you look at a person, physically fits a, you know, normal, typical look, right? It's a person who doesn't have any syndromic look to them. In a trauma, you may think this person has experienced a head trauma, right? They're not properly responding to me or they're talking to me. You can't immediately go, oh, that child is autistic, right? You don't know that. If he is in the back seat and I am super hurt, they're going to treat me first, right? If he looks like he's okay, they're going to treat me first. Or if they can reach me first, they're going to do that. Just the idea that if they reach me first, now they know both things. They know my stuff, but now they know what's going on with this kid. And that is such a big deal because if he can't advocate for himself and I can't advocate for him until they get to him and then they see his ID, at least I know I have mine on and they'll get that information as soon as possible. And that's something that we see with special needs parents. It's also something we see when people are caregivers for people with memory impairments, traumatic brain injuries, dementia, all sorts of things. Those caregiver IDs are helpful because you might get treated first, and it's a great way to get that information across. And they're the
I
same IDs.
Well, in having this conversation, I frankly had not really thought about that very much before. But now that I think about it, I think it is actually just as important,
It
especially for
is.
people who cannot communicate for themselves and probably won't in a car accident, for example. If they use a device, that device probably went flying. So it's
Mhm.
not even in the area.
Nope.
And so, and we do a lot of training of law enforcement and
Mhm,
parents as well. And we do encourage them to have like on the strap,
mhm,
have an identification on the
mhm,
seatbelt strap and things like that.
mhm,
But this way, the parent, if they're incapacitated,
mhm,
um, or if they're freaked out, because
mhm.
you can end up
Oh,
freaked out.
yeah.
Everybody deals with trauma in different ways, and
Right.
some of us can keep our wits about us, and some of us cannot, depending upon
Mhm,
the level of the trauma.
mhm,
But so wonderful to be able to have something on you that lets the EMTs know that if their child is in the car,
mhm.
this some of the things that just so that what you're dealing with, if you will, when you're trying to save their
Yes.
life.
Well,
So,
it's the step beyond that. There's one more benefit that that I think is so impactful, and it is the emergency contact. Because your emergency contact as a caregiver should be someone who knows your health business, but should also be someone who can come and get your kid. Because as we know, right, for many kids on the spectrum, the idea of them going off with some social worker is not going to go well, right? They don't, they don't know the particulars of this child, because we all know what is calming to one child with autism is traumatizing to another. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and we all know that. So having a your emergency contact be someone who your child knows and is comfortable with and will go with willingly. Because if your child's not injured, there's no reason for them to be sent to the hospital and go through that trauma. And there's no reason for them to, I mean, if they need to get checked out, like, of course, but if they're not hurt and they don't need to go to the hospital, why do that to them? And why send them off in a car with a stranger? Because that's not going to go well. At least, certainly with my son, it would not. And so the idea that my emergency contact is my ex-husband, but he knows all my stuff, and he can come pick up Will, and that's great. And it's important to think about this as a holistic thing that is protective for your family. And we always say it's when you break it down, it's like 16 cents a day that you spend on a medical ID for as long as they last. And so to me, that's like the cheapest insurance policy you could possibly buy, right? It's so impactful, and it's peace of mind every day. It's there on that day, that bad day, that you get that phone call, but it's less of a bad day because you got the call and you got it fast.
thank you so much for being with me today. This was so informative, and I'm sure that so many of you guys who are watching, either you're watching or you're listening on the podcast, I'm positive that you got some really valuable information. So, Tara, I just wanted to thank you for your time and your wisdom, and so much that you do for the autism community and beyond.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us and letting us share some of this time with you and your listeners. It's our pleasure. We're just really happy to be able to support the good work that you guys are doing, and I just think it's remarkable and wonderful. And I will be sending you guys a some links and some other helpful materials that you can share with your listeners. But if I can leave them with one thing, it's if you get to the website and you need help, just give us a call. We're here and we really are very happy to help you.
Great, thank you. And for all listeners, if you go to autismfl.org, on the opening page, you just scroll down a little bit and you're going to find the link and all the information to One's Hope Jewelry's right there. So if you have any problems with it, you could also let us know. But we hope that you guys have easy access to it. And so don't just think about the individual, but moms and dads, I think that's a fabulous idea for you to get one as well. Maybe even grandma, if grandma is your caregiver. Anybody who's sort of in that role, I think would be a really fabulous idea. So you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you again soon.
Bye.